Oh, hey, good morning, good afternoon, everybody, depending on which part of this beautiful country that we're in. And welcome to the Rebel News Daily Roundup. I'm your guest host today. This is David Menzies' show. I'm Sheila Gunn-Reid, and I'm joined by my friend Drea Humphrey on the West Coast. Drea, how's it going?
Going pretty good. We still have some smoke in the air, but there's been some rain out in the Okanagan, so that's been good. Yeah, ready to do the show.
It's completely smoky here. Like, I woke up thinking that someone was burning the garbage in our incinerator, and I was like, that's my job. That's my favorite thing to do because I left the window open and it was so smoky. And then I looked back at like my Facebook memories. And 6 years ago, it was like so utterly smoky here that visibility was so low. And so when people say, oh, these fires are unprecedented, no. They're annual. No. This is where we live. This is how it is. We've got a lot to talk about today, and I think we should get right to it. Drea, do you want to do the explainer of what exactly we're doing here today?
Sure. Welcome to the Daily Roundup, as Sheila said. If any of you are new, there's something really cool that we have. It's an option for you to be a part of the show and also support our journalism here at Rebel News. And you can do that in a fun way, uncensored way, depending on what you say on YouTube anyways. If you go to Rumble or Odyssey, there is a chance to do a chat there. And then if you donate, we do our best to read those through the show, and you can give us a comment, feedback. Sometimes tips come through. It's really interesting. Like the other day, someone continued on through my email. I'm working on a story with that. So very interesting. But anything you donate there, like I said, helps us keep the lights on here at Rebel News. So it's a great way to support us, and we get to know you a little better.
Yeah, I like it. I think it's an extension of what we do here at Rebel News, where we sort of democratize the news. We give people a chance to get involved through petitions, through whatever, and this is their chance to get involved and take the show in their own direction, or to bring it back to where it's supposed to be if David and Menzies and I are hosting, because we tend to get a little off track. Let's get to Doug Ford. I think he had a conservative moment. Shocking to find out. So it sounds like he's pushing back on mass immigration into Canada. I think he's one of the few conservatives who are actually saying, like, we need to pump the brakes. It's not fair to the Canadians who are here and to the new Canadians who hope to find a better life here, to just not rein this in so that everybody can adjust, integrate, and hit the ground running, so that we have housing and resources and healthcare and education in place for all these people who are coming here. Let's slow down. And Doug Ford seems to be the only conservative talking about this, like only official conservatives. Lots of normal conservatives like you and me. Right. We talk about this stuff all the time. Like, it's a basic law of supply and demand. Nobody else is really talking about it, and that includes Pierre Poilievre, who one of his big things is affordability. So let's hear from Doug Ford, figuring out that he was elected as a conservative all of a sudden.
What people are seeing here after this Integrity Commissioner and Auditor General's report is nothing but incompetence, right? From the chief of staff who decided to rush through a process, to the housing minister who looked away because he thought it was going to be too politically sensitive, to a premier who directed his housing minister to open up the Greenbelt after promising Ontarians that you would never touch the Greenbelt. But Premier, okay. At what point do you take personal responsibility here, and how are people to have trust in your leadership?
Well, thank you for that, Colin, and I'm sure you just walked down the street from your home, that you have a home. But do you know how many people don't have a home, Colin? There's hundreds of thousands of people that there's hundreds of thousands of people that don't have homes. And yes, 2018, we didn't have a housing crisis. Do you know why we didn't have a housing crisis, Colin? Because there was no jobs here. People weren't coming here. Because the last government lost 300,000 jobs. There was no interest in coming to Ontario. But now, since we've been in office, we've created an environment and condition for people around the world to come to Ontario. Let me finish, Colin. To come to Ontario. When we have a housing crisis, I have two options, Colin. I sit back like the other government did, and let the whole province fall apart, or we move forward and we build homes. Because I know you, Colin, a year down the road, if we don't have the homes, you're the first person that's going to be up here saying, why didn't you build the homes? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Well, Colin, guess what? We're going to build homes. We're going to build homes until people have the same opportunity that you have. You have a nice home down the street, but guess what? There's hundreds of thousands of people that don't have your opportunity, that don't have the good paying job that you have. That's the difference.
I'm kind of shocked. I'm kind of shocked. Usually, like there were shades of Rob Ford there, which was good to see, because Rob would go scorched earth on the media. That's Rob, Doug Ford's dearly departed brother, former mayor of Toronto. He would push back on the media when they, said something completely inaccurate or out of touch, as this guy said. But Doug Ford rarely does that. He sort of, it's hard to watch Doug Ford press conferences because he sort of butt kisses to the same people who just chased his brother right into the grave. But it is true. Okay, so for those people who don't know, outside of Ontario, the Greenbelt is this chunk of protected land around what they call, I think it's the Golden Horseshoe. It's one of the most populous places in the country. And so it was protected, I think, by Dalton McGuinty way back in, I think, 2005, 2006. It prevents large-scale development, and it's designed to protect farmland and other environmentally sensitive land. It was sort of made by an edict. It's not really one of those like essential biospheres, although it does have a lot of farmland. But here's the thing, and I'm not against protecting farmland, by the way, but Ontario also has lots of farmland that isn't directly adjacent to Canada's largest municipality that you could probably zone agricultural forever. The thing is, the left needs to choose now. Do you want to be environmentalists? Or do you want to have mass unfettered migration into Toronto? You only can have one. So if you want to keep the Greenbelt, okay, I'm willing to hear arguments, but I also don't like the government just protecting swaths of land via edict, because they'll do that to the oil patch. They did that to the Great Bear Rainforest, which is not really a thing. It just was like stroke of a pen. We're calling this the Great Bear Rainforest. It wasn't really a thing. And now you can't do anything there. And so I'm sort of against that idea, especially when it's designed to shoehorn people into the big city and not let the city spread out. I'm not against cities spreading out in Canada. Like this idea that we should be against urban sprawl and pile people on top of each other sounds gross to me. That's what they do in some of the less affluent parts, the less developed parts of the world, is build upward instead of outward. We're a very big country. We've got lots of space, but you can only have one here. You can have all the migrants you want to the country, and they flood into Canada's most diverse city, Toronto, where there are communities and people just like them, and it makes integration a lot easier. You can go there, but you need to house them, or you can have the Greenbelt. So Doug Ford needs to be putting pressure on his buddy Justin Trudeau, because they are very friendly lately, to do something about the immigration levels. That's what I see.
Well, it's like you said, like even the people coming here, they're not signing up for this. We're essentially catfishing them. It's like, come to Canada for the dream. Well, you end up homeless. Toronto's had issues with migrants, laying out on the streets until the churches recently opened up to them. So this is ridiculous. What I secretly, I guess openly now, since I'm saying it on the live stream, love about this is, even though Doug Ford was elected as, a progressive conservative, he's basically been a liberal. So you're seeing these progressives eat their own right now when they have to fend for themselves. And which is the people going to care about more? Yes, of course, there is arguments to be had about, preserving the Greenbelt, but people need homes. It's as simple as that. And if you don't deliver, or at least act like you care about that issue, you might not get voted in next time. And I think that's really what we're seeing here. It's one of those issues where he has to stand up for the main concerns, which is housing, both for Canadians who live here and the Canadians who have recently come here. So
Yeah, you
Or
can
the
have a
people
chunk
trying to
of
be Canadians, I should say.
yeah, you can have a chunk of grass around Toronto, or you can have houses. Like
Yeah.
they've got to pick a lane here now. Olivia whispers in my ear that there's like another part of this that's about a minute that maybe we should watch. So let's watch and then react. I haven't seen this yet.
Okay.
Integrity Commissioner's report showed that you sent the housing minister a mandate letter shortly after the last election. Why didn't you campaign about opening up the Greenbelt and these land swaps?
Well, I think I've answered this before, but I'll answer it again. You know, in the last election, we didn't have a housing crisis. And just up to a few months back, I didn't know the federal government was going to bring in over 500,000. Now we learn that those aren't accurate numbers. It's probably up to 800,000 arriving. Like, I didn't get a phone call from the minister. I didn't get a phone call from the prime minister saying, surprise, surprise, we're dropping these many people into your province. And by the way, good luck, you deal with them. That's the reason we have to make sure that we use every tool in our toolbox to build homes. So I ran on getting it done. I ran on building homes, making sure that we're building transit and infrastructure and schools and hospitals. And guess what, folks? We're the only government. We do what we say we're going to do. Some people may not like it, but we're going to get it done.
Well, there you go. Another like direct push at the prime minister there. So what's going on there?
Yeah, and there's this little like side controversy here. So Doug Ford campaigned on not opening up the Greenbelt. But again, circumstances change and people need houses, right?
Yeah.
And so what they did was last year the province took 7,400 acres of land out of the Greenbelt to build 50,000 homes, but they replaced it with 9,400 acres elsewhere. So not only did they so they built some houses and they replaced it with more land somewhere else.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
That's reasonable, except it sounds like they were, according to the Integrity Commissioner's report, and take that for what you will, sounds like they were giving preferential treatment to some developers to get the land. So instead of saying, hey, what's this cronyism happening here? The media is hammering on the fact that you are building houses that people need. Building houses that people need is not the problem or the controversy. The controversy is the alleged accusation that they're giving preferential treatment to some developers. Hammer him on that.
That's the question. Yeah.
Don't hammer him on the fact that he swapped out some land so that people could live in Toronto. That seems like a reasonable thing to do and a good solution to a problem Doug Ford didn't create.
And it seems like there's a lot of tension in the room there during these questions. You can hear people, he's like, Colin, let me finish. I don't know if Colin really does have a house down the street, but it almost seems like he's aware of that. There's a lot going on there, but why are they so feisty over it? They're not even asking like the real journalistic question, as you say, and they're harboring on this issue when they probably do have their own houses and comfort. So it's about being out of touch altogether, it looks like.
Yeah, they're like, why didn't you keep your promise not to build in the Greenbelt? That's not the problem here. The problem is the cronyism. But these people, they're just completely out of touch. Like, and Doug Ford called them on it. So, I guess, like Ben Shapiro used to have a segment of a show called Good Trump, Bad Trump. And I feel like I'm having a moment of like, good Ford, bad Ford. And I'm in good Ford right now. Very strange.
Yeah, that was pretty good. Good Ford. I'll eat a piece of cheesecake to that.
Yeah, it's very destabilizing to me to see him do something good for once. Let's go though. Now we're gonna hit bad Ford. next topic. So we did good Ford. Now we've got bad Ford. So Doug Ford's government has got an anti-racism plan, doubles down on funding for DEI. So that's diversity, equity, and what's the other one? Diversity, inclusivity. Inclusivity,
inclusion, or
whatever, and left-wing groups. So Doug Ford, in a stroke of insanity, he is going to fund the groups that will turn around and campaign against him in the next election by calling everybody to the right of Chairman Mao some sort of crypto fascist neo-Nazi. That's what he's doing. So he's literally funding his enemies, and he's wondering why these people have the resources to go toe-to-toe with the Conservatives in the next election. It's because you gave them the money.
That's so, it's ludicrous. And also it's just like, why do they have to destroy all these good words like diversity and inclusion? Like they twist it, they abuse it. It's not even inclusive anymore. One of my aunts, I'm going to call her out, not by name, she got so mad at me because I said, like, actually, if anybody's getting judged by their skin, which if you read the article, that's what it says. Like, oh, maybe I'll just read that first and then I'll go back to what my aunt why my aunt's mad at me. So it says they are oh, that's the wrong thing. Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. I can't find it. But oh, we have it on. Sorry. I'm a little not feeling that well, so bear with me. Too many individuals are denied opportunities or face discrimination because of the color of their skin, their cultural identity, or their beliefs, says Ontario's minister. So this is part of the reason why they're throwing millions upon millions of dollars into this garbage. And I said the other day on my personal Facebook that, you know, if anybody is facing discrimination by their skin, it's actually white middle-aged men. And boy, did I almost lose some family members with that one. But it's so true because they are the last to get any perks in anything right now. And, you know, even as I would go as far as to say younger adults who are white, like even scholarships, like when my daughter was going through her scholarships and stuff, there was actual preferences to kids who are in the LGBTQ plus community or racialized, or you can see even the way they want you to write essays and stuff like that. It's just so tainted. And to see a government giving millions and millions and millions into this nonsense that you're right is probably going to end up biting them in the end. I guess rightfully so. It's getting nauseating, and it's happening in every government, not just there.
Yeah, this is insane. And it doesn't actually recognize, if you care about diversity and equity, Ontario's the place for you, by the way. Yeah, that's instead of saying we need to fund all these anti-racism initiatives, you should be touting Toronto as a real success story for the Canadian multicultural mosaic, as they say. The most diverse, I think it was in 2022, Ontario was, not Ontario, but Toronto itself was declared the most multicultural city in the world by the United Nations and the BBC. I don't know how the BBC shoehorned themselves into that, but anyways, it's the most diverse city on the face of the planet. According to official data, over half the city's residents were born outside of Canada. And I think there are more visible minorities than white people in Toronto. I think that's the number. So if that's the case, then how can there be so much racism in Toronto? Look at the number of immigrants in Toronto. Over half the population was born outside of the country, not just outside of Toronto. And there are more people of color than there are white people there. Yeah. That should be you shouldn't be funding the busybodies to complain about Toronto and Ontario. You should be celebrating Toronto as a success story to behold around the world. But no, just self-hating nonsense all the time.
It's always that. And, you know, it reminds me of Candace Owens' documentary of where the money for Black Lives Matter went. It's not going to help, you know, Black lives, impoverished lives. Instead, it went to interest groups like this too, you know, like the LGBTQ community, which is not a prominent community in the Black community. No. It's ridiculous. And it's always about following the money.
Yeah, it sure is. And so Doug Ford is funding his enemies, and he's wondering why things are going to go poorly for him in the next election, or at least he'll be in for a real fight in the next election. Yeah. And it's because he gave his political enemies government resources. Good job, Doug. Good job. So we had good Ford and bad Ford. Balance, yin and yang, and I feel better because I know Doug Ford to be more progressive than conservative. Let's move ahead, though. Montreal won't return toppled John A. Macdonald statue to its downtown pedestal. The statue was damaged. That's a neat way of saying vandalized through the mischievous, unlawful actions of protesters during an anti-racism. Damaged. Look at how that's damaged during a protest in 2020. You know what this says to me? This says to me that you can commit vandalism and actual mischief, not Tamara Lich honking for freedom mischief, but like actual mischief. Like these people have damaged more public property than the entire Freedom Convoy did in nearly 4 weeks. And you can do it, and eventually the state will capitulate because they knocked down that statue because they wanted John A. Macdonald erased from the public space. Yeah. And guess what? Montreal's like, okay, fine. You do it. And everybody knows that if you do, look at how dangerous that was, by the way.
That's so dangerous. Yeah. I mean, like, I wouldn't look for the video, but in a Black Lives Matter protest, they did the same thing, and it actually like gave a dad brain damage. It fell right on his head. Yeah, no, it's horrible. And I'm still stuck on them using the word damage because I'm sure we all remember the words that the media used when somebody put a Canadian flag on Terry Fox and made him hold a sign. He was defaced. Yeah. You know what I mean? We all know the freedom community loves Terry Fox, but that was defacing the statue, and this just a little bit of damage, no big deal. It's
his head rolled away.
Ridiculous, and it tells people they can get away with this and do this over and over, and opens up a green light to it. At least they're saying there's anger. Yeah, there we go. Look oh my gosh,
defacing. He's got a Canadian flag on him. Oh my lord. But yeah, you can pull down a statue in a public space with hundreds of onlookers. Police were everywhere that day and didn't do a damn thing. Knock the head off John A. Macdonald. And the city's like, fine, you get your way. Imagine parenting like that. If your
some people do. It's probably their kids. It's their kids taking the statue down. So
yeah. Zero consequences. Those people didn't go to jail for 50 days like Tamara Lich. That's for sure.
No.
Let's go to this next one. Because you've covered these sorts of stories pretty closely because of your unique cultural ties to these communities. Saskatchewan First Nation claims 93 children are buried at Beauval Indian Residential School. Near the northern Saskatchewan village of Beauval, English River First Nation says they found the alleged graves of 79 children and 14 infants using ground-penetrating radar. What have we learned very recently about ground-penetrating radar? It can't find bones. It can only find rocks and other abnormalities under the soil.
That's it.
And still, we keep making this claim. But you know what I hope is that we actually put a shovel in the ground. Because the last 2 times they put shovels in the ground, they didn't find anything. They didn't find anything. Everybody was upset. They did it in Edmonton. They did it in the other place a couple weeks ago. I forget. And nothing was found. And then everybody was all upset. And I'm like, shouldn't you be overjoyed?
Yeah, exactly.
Shouldn't you be happy? Shouldn't we be happy that no genocide happened here? I would be relieved.
Well, that's the way it should be. And I have a report coming up where I say that in the report too. It's like, this is a good thing. You don't want to find 215 children's remains, under the ground. And you're right. Those who are actually excavating, which is the only way to find out what's actually under the ground, they're not turning up with anything. And of course, there are some where they actually know these are, in fact, or this was a grave site. It's just over years, the crosses have broken down. Like, it's not some conspiracy. They knew that there was a graveyard for different reasons. It could be illness or whatever. In this article,
these are the sites of churches. So the residential school is next door to the church. And what do we know about churches, especially like out here on the prairies? The graveyard is at the church because
old churches.
You do the service and then you bury the people right outside of the church. It escaped me, but it was a Manitoba First Nation where they were absolutely convinced that there was a mass grave outside of their residential school. And they did the smart thing for a community to heal and that is to actually find out what the truth is, because there's, everybody talks about truth and reconciliation, but if you want reconciliation, you got to get the truth out first.
Yeah. So what happened to truth? Yeah.
Yeah. And then it was the Charles Camsell Hospital. It was a TB hospital here. And they thought there was a Derek Anipanak, that guy. Anyways, Derek Anipanak, I think he was one of those like anti-pipeline guys. And it's like, Derek, you don't have any pipelines near you. Can you shut up so that the other First Nations can have jobs? Thank you very much. Like Fort McMurray wants this stuff. Shut up. We won't put a pipeline near you, Derek. We promise. That's where I know him from. And now he's like, he's disappointed that no bodies were found there, because he says it will feed denialist narratives. You mean like it might feed the truth? Yeah,
feed the truth and actual questions that should be asked. And I believe he's also saying, well, where did the bodies go? Like, where maybe somebody moved them. And it's like, so it doesn't even end, even when you dig in the ground and you see it's not there. And just back to the original article that we're looking at, they say in 1927, 19 students and 1 teacher died in a fire that destroyed the school and the dorms there. So that's 20 people who could possibly be buried. But I bet you if I dig into this, you're going to see that where they're buried. Like the records are out there for the most part. And like, for example, back to the Kamloops Indian Residential School, there simply just wasn't anywhere near 200 children missing. And like, these schools got paid per child. So it doesn't even make sense on so many levels for 200 students to have been murdered. It really doesn't. So it's sad
also,
that
just further to that, the Catholic Church is usually pretty good at keeping records. Like it was the record keeper of your birth, your baptism, your marriage, your your death, long before the government kept track of those things. The church also keeps track of those things. And, like, for example, if you needed a record of your birth and you were not registered with the province, your church had it. The church is really good at keeping these records. So they know who's in those cemeteries that are now unmarked because they weren't maintained by the community. Okay. But yeah, those records, as you say, 200 kids weren't missing because they know who went to the school.
Yeah. And the ones that unfortunately did die, they do have records of where they were buried, which were in nearby cemeteries. So it's, it's sad that people are obviously hurting. And what I think is why embellish anything? There are actual facts of some horrible things that took place in these schools. Why not just talk about those? Why do you have to embellish and go on here? I don't understand how they don't know at this point that ground penetrating radar simply cannot detect. I think they even say that there's 14 infants. So it looks like there's 79 children and 14 infants. It's not possible. It's not possible to do that with ground penetrating radar. If you haven't seen our documentary, if you go to kamloopsdocumentary.com, it's still there. I think it's behind the paywall. So I think it's $6 a month to get access to all of our stuff. And who knows, maybe we'll release it for free soon, but check it out and you can see how we walk you through it and everything and the facts like that. And it's just really sad. And I think the most sad part is that our children are still being taught this narrative that's not supported by facts. And it's, of course, really troublesome for them when you could just talk about what we really do know has happened,
Yeah. Yeah. And it just, like no country is perfect, but ours is pretty good. We didn't have slavery here. It's a pretty great place to be if you're a visible or a sexual minority. It's why we had these waves of mass migration to this country. And it just, to teach little kids to hate their country, I think is a terrible, terrible thing. And the worst part is a lot of it is based on lies, exaggerations, and hyperbole. But I hope, here's my hope. I hope
Doug Ford. Doug Ford just came on my phone. Anyways.
We're back to bad, Doug. I hope that somebody actually makes a complaint to the United Nations about genocide, because of all the things that the United Nations does quite poorly, including prevent genocide, They're really good at investigating genocide after the fact. After they've done nothing to prevent it, they're pretty good at finding out where the bodies are and what happened to them. They do this, unfortunately, quite frequently. Rwanda, in the former Yugoslavia. So I hope they do complain to the United Nations and say there was a genocide happening in Canada. I mean, Justin Trudeau said there was a genocide in Canada. That's all the proof we need. Let's make a formal complaint to the United Nations and have them come excavate. Because if the local communities are not going to do this to provide healing and truth and reconciliation, let's get somebody from outside the country to do it. And, instead of just ground penetrating radar rumors, let's get to the bottom of this, please.
Exactly. Here.
Okay, let's hit. That's that. Let's hit an ad break, and then we've got some Freedom Convoy stuff and lots of stuff about the federal government wasting our money. Evergreen stuff.
Justin Trudeau's new censorship law, Bill C-18. It's a shakedown and a desperate attempt to keep the mainstream media afloat. Many have already lost their ability to access our Facebook and Instagram pages. The blackout will soon affect every user in Canada. We've partnered with Private Internet Access, a VPN provider dedicated to safeguarding digital privacy. For just $2 a month, you can maintain your access to our content across all your devices at piavpn.com/rebelnews.
Do you want to start feeling like your pre-COVID self again? You're not alone. The wellness company's Spike Support Formula is an all-natural supplement to help people do just that. It was created by cardiologist Peter McCullough and his expert team of doctors to help the people experiencing effects from COVID and the you-know-what. Go to twccanada.health/rebel today.
All right, let's get into this next story. For those of you who don't know, the trial of Freedom Convoy leader, spiritual leader of the anti-mandate movement, Tamara Lich, is proceeding towards the third week of this month in Ottawa. As you know, as I just pointed out, there are plenty of people who do real mischief and vandalism in this country, and they walk away scot-free. They can topple a statue and get their way. But Tamara, who led the convoy of tens of thousands of Canadians into their nation's capital, where they came to protest the lockdowns and mandates and ask for their freedom back completely peacefully. It was just like a weeks-long street party that may have been annoying to the residents, but it wasn't criminal unless you talk to the Crown prosecutors there. I think Tamara's real crime was embarrassing the government. Her trial is going forward, and the CTV News has published a Canadian press article, reblogged a Canadian press article, talking about Tamara. The leaders of the Freedom Convoy, so I think Chris Barber also, are preparing to answer to criminal charges next week for their part in the massive demonstration that gridlocked Ottawa last year. But the stakes go beyond the actions of two protest organizers. Tamara Lich and Chris Barber were amongst the most prominent organizers of the protest movement that rolled into Ottawa early 2022, and they're scheduled blah, blah, blah. But that's not where the scrutiny will stop. Lawrence Greenspan, that's Tamara's lawyer, who is great. And if you want to donate to cover her costs to fight these mischief charges against her, I think it's helptamara.com. Is that right, Efron? And that goes directly to the Democracy Fund. Or Olivia, if someone could confirm that to me, goes directly to the Democracy Fund. And because the Democracy Fund is a registered Canadian charity with a focus on civil liberties litigation and education, you will receive a charitable tax receipt for that. So suck it, Ottawa. So anyway, you can do that there. I think it's helptamara.com. Yes, it's helptamara.com. So they want to make this about the Freedom Convoy as a whole instead of what Tamara is charged with. So the fringe interlopers and hangers-on that were sort of on the edges of the convoy, who may have said and done some crazy things, they want to use that to paint the whole of the Freedom Convoy as that, and then thus Tamara, who only ever called for peace, only ever called for love, only ever went to Ottawa in the name of unity, who peacefully went out into the street looking for police to turn herself in. She went looking for police to turn herself in. And she told me she did it because she didn't want her husband to see her taken away in handcuffs. She said it would be traumatizing for him. That's the kind of woman she is.
She really is.
And to speak to her, I would be so filled with bile and hatred for the people who took my freedom from me. And she is so peaceful. She doesn't have a resentful bone in her body, and I'm resentful on her behalf.
Me too. She's so graceful.
Anyways,
like she's handling all of this with such grace. That's sort of the impression I got of her when I was doing the BC leg of her book tour, which, by the way, the CTV article does mention her book, which is interesting because it almost seems like they've been avoiding it. But just so people are wondering, what exactly are the charges? Both her and Chris Barber, I believe, have the same charges. So mischief, obstructing police, counseling others to commit mischief. That's the most laughable one.
That's the one. That's the one where she would say like, like honk honk.
Yeah.
Like
did they go to like honking school? Like you push this for this? Like, no, it's so sad. And intimidation. And so, you have these people who want to put the whole convoy on trial and things like that. I mean, the article does say that this is going to be precedent setting. And I agree with that because this was a peaceful movement. They were it was annoying to some of the people around there, but that's about as far as it goes. And they were working and willing to work with authorities as well. And the Prime Minister instead just hid in his ivory tower and just threw the Emergencies Act on them. Like it's insane. So we're going to be covering this, of course, in a way that you can trust, just like we covered the actual Freedom Convoy themselves. And what's up with always putting Freedom Convoy in like exclamation marks? Isn't that weird in itself?
Those are scare quotes.
They're like
scare quotes.
Freedom, the scare quotes and stuff like that. It's like, no, that's actually just the name of it. What?
Just like this is just making me walk down memory lane about how ridiculous the original Crown on this case was. The one who appealed to the judge.
They're gone now, right? Yeah,
he's gone. Yeah, he's gone. Glenn McGregor is going to have to find a new person to rat to. And it's a story I'll tell one day. Anyways, they held her without bail. Little Tamara, who's like 4'11". She says she's 5 feet, but I know she's lying.
Ezra says 4 foot nothing.
They held her
nothing, Grandma.
They held her for 49 days. There were times at which I was watching her trial and tweeting it live that I didn't realize that she was in the prisoner's docket because she's so small I couldn't see her. And they said that Justice Julie Bourgeois decided that Tamara would pose a risk to, quote, the physical, mental, and financial health and well-being of Ottawa residents if she were to try to rekindle the protest. But Tamara never said that she would rekindle the protest. She said, let me go and I'll go back home. It's over. Let me go and I'll go back home. But they kept her just in case she thought I might walk down the streets. They basically banned her from Ottawa. Like they banished her from her nation's capital because I think her crime truly was embarrassing the government, being the most effective opposition Justin Trudeau has ever seen, because this is her turning herself in.
Yeah.
It's so sad. Look how tiny she is.
So small, yeah. And both her and Chris Barber, they say like, I mean, the word organized, yes, of course. I say they like organized it so it didn't get out of control. There is a lot that was grassroots about this. I mean, both of them say that they were just surprised at how many people actually showed up. And the fact that it maintained this peaceful stuff, and not just peaceful, people were feeding the homeless, it had really good vibes, is impressive. And that's where the organization is a blessing, that there were actual leaders that could keep this civil, because people were angry, rightfully so. And I was just praying that there wasn't going to be a drunken fist fight that was going to be blown out of proportion, but not even that happened. Yeah. So So it's just, I wish her the best. And if you haven't read her book, what is it? What's the URL for that one? So again, CPC mentions it.
Yeah,
The Convoy book?
Yeah,
okay,
theconvoybook.com. And it's Hold the Line, my story from the heart of the Freedom Convoy, written by my friend, the indefeatable Tamara Lich. And you've heard stories from people in the Freedom Convoy, but this is her story, what she knows to be true and what happened to her, and how the convoy itself restored her faith in her fellow Canadians. She moved from being a Western separatist, or someone who puts her head on her pillow at night and dreams of Western separatism, that's me, to a staunch federalist, because she believes that Canada is worth saving, and Canada is not just its witless prime minister. So.
Well, the Freedom Convoy did that for so many of us. I think it was just to see everybody together, it was great that Rebel News was covering protests, because a lot of people would email and say, oh my goodness, thank you for covering that protest. Now I know I'm not alone. But the Freedom Convoy did that on such a huge level from across the country. And I can't forget, I remember I'm like, okay, I didn't know how big it was going to be either. And when it was like, okay, I'll go at, I think, 5 a.m. and meet with some of the trucks. I thought it was going to be like 2 or 3 trucks leaving from Surrey. And I was like, oh my goodness, I think there's 50 here. That's a lot for one stop in Surrey, BC. How many people are going to Ottawa?
Yeah.
It was such a great Canadian moment in history. And that's why I bought my kids each a book too, because they need this for the history books. And they're certainly not going to get it from the state schools at this point.
Yeah. Let's breeze through these next few things, because 2 of them are about the government wasting our money, and the third one is about how Justin Trudeau thought that he could run up against Facebook and win, and apparently everything he's tried to pull on Facebook hasn't done anything. Uh-oh, somebody is bigger and more powerful than Mr. Justin Trudeau in this country. Justin Trudeau being the most surprised to learn it. So 39% of desk phones, this is from Blacklock's. If you don't have a Blacklock subscription, this is behind their paywall. I love look at the thumbnail they use. An empty federal government parking lot, because these people still have not gone back to work. 39% of desk phones paid for by the federal government are not in use. So the government found that they have over 500,000 fixed line desk phones at federal offices nationwide, and 39%, or 203,000, almost 204,000, were dormant. And of those, nearly 78,000 were permanently disconnected. And so, as it turns out, most of the federal government, or not most, but many federal government workers are still working remotely. Fine, I don't care. Maybe they're scared. Maybe they like working in their pajamas. Maybe they're worried about the next COVID wave. Not my problem. But let's disconnect those landlines, if you wouldn't mind, and also sell the empty buildings. Sell the empty buildings, turn them into houses. Houses. Put some new Canadians in those new apartments that used to be federal buildings, and it lifts the burden off some of these municipalities to use, to rezone land to build stuff, and the federal government doesn't no longer have to maintain empty buildings. Disconnect the phone lines, make some condos, call it a day.
I agree completely. And, there hasn't been as many protests, but every time I covered a protest that was outside of a constituent's office, it didn't matter if it was municipal or provincial, there was never anyone inside, middle of the weekday, it didn't matter. And then, you ask people walking by and they're like, yeah, no one's ever there. And so it's, get rid of it. What are we paying for this for? You know what I mean? What are you guys doing? So,
yeah. It's my dream to just turn every federal government building in this country into a condo. This is just
let's have you run, Sheila. Let's do it. That'll give you your campaign promise right there.
All the condos, everything is a condo now. So this next one is a story that I have been on since 2016, and the CBC has just discovered it. So that's great. Less than 1 in 5 federally funded car charging stations is operational. Thank you, CBC, for showing up 7 years late to a story that I've been covering forever, because this comes out in order paper questions all the time. Curious conservative MPs will ask, like, hey, what are the hours of use for these chargers at fisheries and oceans and immigration and environment? What are the hours of use of these chargers? And they table them in the House of Commons. All you have to do is be also a curious little kitten like me and go find them, but nobody's curious in the mainstream media. And you can also find out how many of these ministries actually have electric cars by which to use the charger in front of them. And many ministries have a charger with no car that's electric. And I'm like, good job, guys.
Or it's like 2 lots. Or like out here, you can actually see, like, I don't know if people are going around cutting the cords or they're just like breaking down, but like even just not the federal stuff, like even like TD Bank, for example, I've noticed like they don't have any hose anymore or whatever you would call that. And I've seen that at the mall too. And I'm like, okay, so nobody's even replacing that. They have these installed, but then they're not actually even providing the service, even to pay for it. And certainly the ones that were free, I've noticed, like those are just not in use. It's like,
you can't even give it
so
away.
Much smoke. Yeah. Yeah.
And you know what?
Or maybe they don't want to give it anyway. Like maybe their bill's too high now or something. So they're cutting the cords themselves. I should look into it. Like what happened?
I found car chargers that were in places, they built them and then they couldn't hook them up to electricity because they were built in a place that couldn't access the electricity in an affordable way. Like they would have to like trench and dig out a whole parking lot just to get electricity to the car charger so it can charge maybe the 1 or 2 cars a month that pulled up to this thing. And these were the ones run by the federal government. But honestly, I'm quite relieved that nobody is using these things because we don't have enough electricity on the grid for the Liberals' fevered dreams about the amount of electrical cars we should be using. Like they say, the government invested $768 million between 2016 and 2027 to buy and install nearly 90,000 chargers. We don't have the electricity for these things. No, we just don't. So, and 90,000 chargers. Do we even have 90,000 fully electric cars in this country? I'm not sure. I think we have somewhere around like
50.
Maybe no, I think like in Alberta, and I pulled it up last week and I can't remember the number, but you can actually check because our government publishes this, thank God, the vehicle registrations by fuel type. So I can just go look and see how many diesel cars are on the road and hybrid cars are on the road and gas powered and propane and natural gas and fully electric. And I think
there we go.
I think this is the Canadian government. So hybrid electric, battery electric. Okay, so there were 95,896 plug-in electric vehicles registered in the whole country. And the feds have funded nearly 90,000. So you could very nearly get your own charger for your electrical car. Thanks to the feds.
What a mess.
What on earth? That's crazy.
Oh,
that's
man.
Crazy.
It ties into your good old Premier Danielle Smith slamming, I love this, climate criminal Stephen Guilbeault about attempting to limit Alberta's energy resources. It's kind of all connected, but some common sense it looks like we're going to hear.
I love her.
I have a good relationship with many of the federal ministers, and I'm really hopeful as we put our table together that we're going to come to some constructive approach so that we can reach carbon neutrality by 2050. But I have to say, I'm constantly dismayed that Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault continues to take shots against our province as we're trying to begin this collaborative process. He should be coming to the table in good faith. and he should zip it, quite frankly, because he's not helping. When he starts talking about emissions caps, when he starts putting forward aggressive emissions reduction targets that are unachievable by 2035, I have to react to that, and I'm hoping that his colleagues will rein him in. The targets being put forward by Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault are arbitrary, not based on data, not based on science, seem to be plucked out of thin air, and unachievable, as well as being unconstitutional. And that's what we're pushing back against. If we can get oriented around 2050, we'll find a lot of common ground.
So, I was speaking to the minister's office, and clearly you're saying that your gripe here is specifically with the minister, not the government as a whole. But they're saying, the government of Canada, the government of Alberta, they have agreed to terms of a working group to develop a clean economy in Alberta, and that you're really just posturing here. And if you really wanted to work with the government, you'd, stop the posturing and get down to work on this.
Happy to do that. They need to tell Stephen Guilbeault, stick a sock in it, so that we can get together at the table.
Well, they're saying that you need to do that.
Negotiations. Not at all. He's the one who's gone to China to give them advice on how to reach a 2060 target when they are bringing on 2 coal-fired plants a week for electricity. Meanwhile, from there, he is telling us that Suncor is going to face an emissions cap. That is being provocative. He's the one who has to dial it back. And as soon as he does, we'll be happy to have a constructive conversation at the table. But he's got to stop dropping bombs, and he's got to stop criticizing our industry.
Do you know what?
Oh my gosh.
She gets younger and prettier looking to me the more she fights with the feds. Like she's doing something different. She looks great. And then I realized
feeling alive.
And then I remember she's telling the feds to screw off. And it's the most beautiful thing a woman can do.
Yeah, she's such a boss. And there's so much there that she said that is so true. And I love when she said, it's not based on data, it's not based on anything, he's pulling it out of thin air. And of course, the reference to him being an advisor for China, of all places, when you claim to care about these issues, you're actually doing that little side hustle there. She fit it all in there so nicely.
She's great. Telling the feds to stick a sock in it. Just beautiful. You know what? We're going to have so many quotes from her when she's no longer premier. I hope she's premier forever at this point, but there are going to be so many quotes from her. It's going to be the way I quote Ralph Klein now with his colorful language that I will look back and I will favorably quote this premier. Telling
I
Stephen
already
Guilbeault,
quote her on Twitter because she says great one-liners.
Yeah, she's so great one-liner. She's an Alberta girl. We're like that.
Yeah. I think the last quote I did with hers was she said that I think you guys had 650 wildfires and 500 of them were human caused. And it's just BC is the opposite. It's so hard to find. You can find the information, of course, if you look it up, but you won't find the premier ever saying anything like that. He's never going to just say it. So,
yeah. She just basically told this guy what was what.
Oh yeah, there it is. We can play it if you want.
Yeah.
Premier, do you believe that climate change and the unprecedented wildfires we've been seeing this summer are at all related?
Unprecedented.
All I know is in my province, we had 650 fires and 500 of them were human caused. So we have to make sure that when people know that when it's dry out there and we get into forest fire season, that they're being a lot more careful, because anytime you end up with an ignition that happens, it can have devastating consequences. And so that's what I would hope that we can educate the public on that front as well.
Simple, to the point, accurate. The people are the idiots. It's if you really want to stop the fires, educate the people causing the fires on how to stop them. It's really not rocket science.
And, that journalist thought that he just set out a big bear trap for her to stick her leg in. And she came with the facts and she's 500 of them are human started. So unless climate change is making people go crazy and turn into firebugs, it's not doing it. Yeah, and the rest are probably lightning, Mm-hmm. Okay, let's get to this Facebook thing because I alluded to it. So Meta, Facebook, Instagram, the Lizard King Zuckerberg's enterprise.
Lizard King.
He's blocking Canadian news because he doesn't want to pay Justin Trudeau's shakedown. So Justin Trudeau has a law in Canada that it's the Online News Act that says that if you share a news link onto social media, then the social media company then has to pay the journalistic organization which produced the news, which is Justin Trudeau's way of getting somebody else to fund his friends in the media. But here's what this would mean, tangibly speaking. It's like forcing the newspaper boy, who is only delivering the newspaper to you, to pay the news company for the newspaper he delivered. What?
Exactly.
Right?
That doesn't make any sense.
Like, and Justin Trudeau is so bad that now I'm defending Zuckerberg, a man whom I just called a lizard 45 seconds ago. But this is where we're at.
It's like the Doug Ford and Trudeau. Now it's this, like, I guess the pendulum is switching or something.
Again, very unsettling for me. But anyways, according to, and Justin Trudeau thought, I'm not going to back down when Meta continues to block Canadian news access, because Canadians so love me that they will choose me and not the Zucker King. Well, that isn't the case.
No.
So as it turns out,
we're addicted to Facebook.
We are addicted to social media. And you know what? This is one of those times where I'm cheering for a social media addiction to plague the minds of Canadians so that it teaches Justin Trudeau a lesson. And it's hard to teach a stupid man a lesson. And that might be the problem here. But Canadians have not left Facebook en masse because Facebook has picked a fight with Justin Trudeau. They haven't. They continue to use Facebook despite the fact that they can't get their news there. It sounds like maybe they're just going directly to the news outlets, or maybe Canadians just don't care about seeing news on social media, which also could be the case. But they're not giving up their cat memes and
you got me at cat memes, Sheila. My goodness.
Cat memes, and looking at how well or how poorly the people who were mean to them in high school are doing these days. They're not giving that up. They like that more than they like Justin Trudeau, which is good news for my faith in my fellow Canadians.
You know what we should look into? Have more people join Twitter because you can still get your news on Twitter now quite easily. Right. And I would say in a less censored fashion too. So that's interesting. But yeah, no, I'm not surprised. You hit it on the nail with the cat memes. This is pretty much the reason I'm still on Facebook, is the cat memes.
Me too.
Yeah. So I don't even have a cat, but I just love watching those videos. So, but yeah, and it's the second example that it reminds me of sort of like the cartel or something, like we need our cut of your business kind of thing here. But he also, when the Liberals said we're pulling out on advertisement except for our campaign, or like for our party, they said like, well, it was only going to be less than 1% of Meta's like revenue or whatever. Like, it's like no big deal. It's like, shoo away, you little authoritative fly, get out of my face until you know your role and come back. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how long this will play out. But I suspect the closer it gets to election time, if Facebook holds its ground, they're going to have to back down because they need their state media's narrative to come out about their party. That's the way I see it anyways.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. And yeah, I think that's funny that the Liberals are so unprincipled that they can't stick to their guns when it comes to not buying ad buys on Facebook for the party. It's palatable enough for the party of which Justin Trudeau leads, but it is not palatable enough for the Canadian public to be able to access their news via Facebook, which is, I think, where a lot of people had been accessing it. Maybe they just don't care that they're not seeing news anymore. But yeah, I remain there for like the wrestling memes, out of context, Dusty Rhodes. Friends, if you're watching at home, make that a like in your Facebook. Anyway, so we should hit an ad break, and then if we don't have any, and then if we have chats, we'll go to those, and if we don't, we'll just tidy up a few things from Saskatchewan.
Now's your time. Now's the time to weigh in through chat on Rumble if you have something to say.
Because our friends in Saskatchewan, they're genociding vulnerable kids if you listen to the left.
In a world plagued by conformity, where truth is distorted, freedom is a distant memory, and Big Brother is always watching. One man, Winston Smith, looks to break through his bleak existence. Introducing the all-new Rebel Illustrated Classics edition of George Orwell's iconic book, 1984. Now, more than ever, in the age of lockdowns, 15-minute cities, and World Economic Forum globalism, everyone must read 1984. Uncover the hidden depths of this literary classic with our exclusive illustrated edition that brings Orwell's haunting vision to life, reborn with a foreword by Ezra Levant and 30 captivating new illustrations by artist Paul Ravoche.
You see that Orwell is not only explaining what might come, but in my opinion, what's already here, even back when he wrote it in 1949, but much more so as we see revealed today, particularly with the last 3 years.
Join the rebellion against conformity. Get your hands on the Rebel Illustrated Classics edition of 1984, now available at buy1984.com.
Alrighty, let's go to Saskatchewan, New Brunswick, two provinces exhibiting some pretty real sanity around this progressive hellscape of a country. And I was looking at some data this morning because I was talking with my friend Lise in Saskatchewan, who's really been a fighter on this issue, that there's a real appetite in Alberta for our provincial government to follow suit.
Yeah.
So... and of course, it's the conservative thing. And you know who will get prettier and just younger looking is Danielle Smith. She continues to do these things.
Yeah.
But in Saskatchewan and in New Brunswick, they basically have said, look, if kids want to change their gender, we're not going to stop them. But the parents should know.
Of course.
And of course, like that is like, you don't, my kids are not going to have secrets with teachers. I'll tell you that much right now. And if you're a teacher who wants to have secrets with my kid, I'm just going to assume that you're some sort of psychotic pervert. I'm sorry. I'm just
everybody used to assume that, like not too long ago. You don't have secrets with kids. Oh, especially sexually related secrets. Like, let's be honest. That's what this is. It's all about sexual orientation. Oh my gosh.
These are gross. So
there was a poll that came out. Oh, go on.
So Marcy Yen, her greatest claim to fame was, much like Seamus O'Regan, talking on TV, reading scripts someone else had written. I think she's on CTV as well. So just like all the like progressive failures upward, I guess, from CTV, those are just all going to be MPs now, I guess. But anyways, she says that she's the Minister for Women, Gender Equality and Youth. Okay, whatever. That ministry shouldn't even exist. But anyways, she says policies in Saskatchewan and New Brunswick that require parental consent. And this isn't just all students. This is students under the age of 16, so the minoriest of minors. Before students under 16 can have schools use their preferred pronouns and names, puts transgender and non-binary kids in a life or death situation. Okay, so why am I even giving my kid a name at birth? Why am I? Because I should just
You're not supposed to, Sheila. You're supposed to let them decide their name.
Right. I'm having a baby, not a baby. But what, like, I named my kid. I raised my kid. And then as soon as they get to kindergarten, some teachers like, actually, no, little Susie is going to be a little Steve, and we're going to call him that, and you don't get a say in any of it. What kind of upside down world do these people think they're living in? However, I hope the Liberals just put the pedal to the metal on this issue, because this is the one thing that turns centrists and people who don't pay attention to people like me who are on Team Millstone, where if you want to sexualize little kids, let me tie the millstone around your neck and throw you into the deepest depths of the ocean, like Jesus said that we should do. I get right on Team Millstone, and all of a sudden people who are, like, we see this all the time at the protests, where people who normally don't march and protest together are like holding hands to save the little ones from this nonsense. You've got Muslim parents, Christian parents, new Canadians. They're out there all united in this cause. And I hope the Liberals just ride this thing right to the bottom, because this is the kind of thing that flips Democrat states into Republican states in the United States. And so bring it on.
Yeah, and you see, these different groups, you see actual diversity coming together and standing up against this issue. But the truth of the matter is there is a significant silent majority. They're not daring to go to these protests right now. They don't want to be called a bigot or a transphobe or told they don't care about kids who might kill themselves, but they're just going to change their vote. I know people personally. I know NDP voters who are telling me for the first time they're going to vote Conservative over this issue because they just think it's so messed up. But, they're not going to tell their Facebook friends or anything like that. So you're right. God uses all things for good in the end. And perhaps this madness will end up with some actual change on this issue because it's been an underlying issue in the school system that was really going under the radar for years, and it was affecting vulnerable kids who have social issues or have experienced trauma. They seem to have been getting the brunt of this rapid gender dysphoria you can get from school, but now it's expand. They've gotten greedy with it, and they're just trying to separate parents from their kids essentially on a very basic fundamental level. Your child's identity. It's nuts. There was a recent poll that came out. We talked about it recently as well. And parents want to know. They, in large, based on that poll, parents want to know their child's identity. Go figure. Who would have thought? And like I said before in a previous live stream, some of those parents may be okay with their kid transitioning. When I covered the story of out in Castlegar, BC, Castlegar Elementary, a kindergarten grade 1 teacher decided in retaliation after a drag queen story time was canceled at a library to then subject the children without the parents' information in her K grade 1 class to her own drag queen story time. There were parents who said, listen, I probably would have said okay to my child going to that, but I'm pissed off that I didn't even know about it. And I have to come, my kid came home and said, hey, I saw a dragon queen today. And they're like, what the heck's a dragon queen? Like, this is so shocking. It needs to end. And the good news is more and more parents are awake, and we'll see how that turns into the votes. But even so, like, for example, the Conservative Party is still pretty quiet on this issue. I do want to say in British Columbia, the only politician really speaking about this matter is MLA John Rusted, who's also the leader of the Conservative Party of British Columbia. He's done statements about women and girls having their own safe spaces, and that parents should, in fact, be able to decide. And I do believe Pierre Poilievre recently has said something similar about it should be up to the parents. So slowly, we're making some progress.
Yeah, I saw they tried to, once again, the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, for a moment in time, they were on the right side of history with their intervention into the Public Order Emergency Commission on behalf of peaceful protesters. But they've gone back to being crazy because they are saying that this is a violation of trans students' rights. These policies have a discriminatory impact on trans and gender diverse students, said the director of equality programs at the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. What about the discriminatory effect that it has on parents and our right to know what's happening with our kids? If this guy from the CCLA wants to have a say in what my kids are doing, great. I'll tell you where you can mail the child support check. But until such time, I'm in charge. And they try to equate it to students using nicknames. Students using nicknames, like shortening up Stephen to Steve or Patricia to Patty, that's a little different than your kid taking on the identity of the opposite sex. Something that we know has a direct correlation. I'm not making the causation claim, but there is a correlation to increased suicidality. Now, I think it is not only a correlation and a causation, that post-gender transition, the suicidality goes up. But we at least know that there's a tie between kids struggling with gender identity and suicidality. Wouldn't you want the parents to know? Like, if you thought there was a potential for my kid to come home and hang themselves in their closet, and wouldn't you want me to know? Wouldn't you want me to be on the lookout for that stuff? Or would you keep that a secret at school and then claim to care about that child? more than
It's
me.
so backwards. Like before we used to say, you know, come out of the closet, you know, accept people for their sexual orientation, come out, the family should be accepting. Now they're not even giving the family the opportunity. And that's when you know this has gone too far. And it's not even really about equality, it's about something else, because it doesn't make any sense to teach kids to hide their identity from their parents, not even give them a chance to be accepted if that's who they want to be. And just on it, like I said, on a very basic level, you're teaching children to not tell their parents things, which obviously can trickle into other things that they're doing as well. If authorities or you figures that they're supposed to trust and respect are setting up that path, why would they tell their parents about other things?
Now, I'm angry. You're probably angry about this. I'm angry about a lot of things, but apparently Canadians are getting angry, and we should just chill out, according to the Toronto Star. Here's what experts say is happening and how we can tame our temper. You know, there's such thing as righteous indignation. Like in the face of injustice, you get angry enough to do something about it. That's where I try to be all the time. I try to be a happy warrior, except when I see people sexualizing the little ones and pastors being arrested in front of their screaming, crying children. Then I feel like I'm angry, but I feel like it's righteous indignation at what I see before me. But the Toronto Star says that it's due to a litany of factors like the ongoing COVID-19 crisis. Stop already. It's not ongoing. Skyrocketing costs of living. So Justin Trudeau, the rage and divisions bubbling on social media, and much, much more. The anger can then feed itself into a vicious cycle, some experts say. Okay, which experts? Which experts? Leading us to disengage with our rational thinking minds and plunge further into hyperfixating on the negative. This from the Toronto Star, which makes I think a hobby, it might even be a business model of calling anybody, again, to the right of Chairman Mao, a racist, bigot, sexist, homophobe, white supremacist, crypto-Nazi. I'm having a real tough time taking lessons on avoiding negativity from these people.
Yeah, no, that's all. I mean, you said it. Yeah, I agree.
All right.
Like, it is what it is. It's like, I can't believe we're even talking about this stuff like so often, but yeah, I just agree. And I also got to run to the courthouse.
Oh, you got to run to the courthouse. Let's get you out of here.
Yeah.
Let's get you out of here. Okay. Olivia, do we have any chats today? Oh, we just have one. Memory hole, $10. If gender identity is as trivial as a nickname, then what's the big deal about telling parents? Great point. Great point. They can't have it both ways, can they? Very good point. Yes. And that's another thing too. If you're born gay, then how can your sexuality be fluid?
Yeah. And then also
very confusing to me.
There's so much confusing. Even like when it's like, okay, it's all fluid, but then they pick certain colors to show that they're the opposite sex. It's very confusing. Imagine being a kid trying to make sense of any of this. If we can't grasp it.
I can't get it. I don't get it. And I wouldn't want to inject little ones with this in this terrible confusion. Okay, we got to get Drea out of here. She's got to go to the courthouse. She's working on a story. Thanks to everybody who tuned in. Thanks to everybody who pitched in a little bit to keep the lights on around here, especially you, Memory Hole. Thanks to everybody who works behind the scenes in Toronto and across the country and really around the world to make sure Rebel News is ready for you when you want to see us. Thanks to my co-host Drea, who's working very hard. She's got something to do. And as my friend David Menzies always says, stay sane.
I am doing something today that I have never tried before. Listen up. I'm looking for collaborators in a new and exciting initiative. As you most likely know, YouTube a long time ago demonetized Rebel News, and we are 100% viewer funded. Now, while our supporters are fantastic at helping us cover legal campaigns and special reporting missions, unfortunately, the reality is our day-to-day operational expenses often exceed our income stream. Which is crazy if you think about it, because my videos across all platforms attract hundreds of thousands of views and sometimes even millions. So I want to share that reach with the right partners. If you have a product or business and want to enter a win-win relationship with me, please go to rebelnews.com/ads and fill in the form to let me know. I won't be accepting anyone. I need to believe in your business or product so I can sell it proudly for you. And for successful applicants, I will guarantee a minimum view count, meaning even if your ad is published on the less popular reports, we'll keep promoting your business or product until it gets the agreed minimum eyeballs. So again, if you have a cool